want to talk about crushing pressure and stress, it was there for me. And so today we're going to talk about not traditional stress management. We're not talking about the normal stuff you hear on these kinds of CLEs. This was me back in the day. I didn't have that long hair, and I was not female, and I did not transition to male, but was watching all these CLEs back in the day, and I was doing everything I possibly could to manage my stress. That's basically what we've been taught. Manage it. Lawyers have to have stress. It's just part of the job. But there was a distinction that happened for me after I went into the hospital with a migraine headache. And speaking of title companies, in Florida, we have homestead exemption, and realtors always thought they had to close by the end of the year, right? And we would have so many closings the last week of the year. We had tons of closings on December 31st. And there was one year where we had like 25 closings on that last day. And I remember being at a closing, and I started seeing this aura. I didn't know what it was, and it was ended up being a migraine, and I couldn't sleep. And so I called my mother, who realtor, and she came and got me, brought me to the hospital. And ultimately, they thought maybe I was having a stroke. I was only like 30 years old, right? But after numerous tests, they stuck a needle in my back, thinking it was I can't remember what they said they thought it was, but they stuck this needle in my back to try to drain fluid out of my spine. It was migraine, and it was so bad because the stress had built up, suppressed stress for years. And so what we're talking about today is not the traditional stress management. The mindset shifts work, the supplements, the techniques. I did 45, I counted them up, and I did a blog post on this. I did 45 different techniques to try to manage my stress, but stress can't really be managed. And so we're going to talk a little bit differently today. So most of us, if you've been practicing for any appreciable amount of time, know this moment where you are stressed and you're burnt out, and you've had this moment where something feels slightly off, but you keep going because you have to. You're reviewing an issue, responding to a client, making a decision under pressure, but you realize something's off and something's missing. And so what we're going to look at today is stress and physical depletion, what they do to our judgment, our communication, and our decision making. That migraine was like a turning point for me. I knew I had to do something different about stress than just exercise or, I'm 6'9", I played college basketball. So it was funny. My sister walked in with her boyfriend in my apartment one time, and I was doing yoga, and watching a 6'9" guy do yoga is almost comical. But in the end, none of that worked long term. And so today, what we're going to be discussing is how we can start to make impaired decisions when there's too much pressure. Our attention narrows, our judgment starts to shift, our communication suffers. I remember litigating. I did a lot of real estate, but I did litigation too. And ultimately, I would start blowing up at these guys and gals on the other side because I was so burnt out that my decisions were suffering. And so Chris is going to talk about the physical aspects of being in better shape and how that affects your cognitive abilities and your ability to think. But most attorneys don't fully recognize what's happening. So we're going to speak briefly about how stress works, how we are actually doing it to ourselves by how we think. The pressure is outside. The stress, feel it inside because of how we think. So this overview quickly, we're going to talk about stress and judgment, the mechanics of how chronic stress erode our decision-making capabilities. Chris is going to speak to physical depletion. He clearly is not depleted physically whatsoever. The guy gets up every day at 3 a.m., is in the gym by 4. And he's not your typical gym rat meathead. He's bright, he's smart, and he's got all of this figured out as far as how does your physical depletion and what happens when you stop exercising because you're so busy and then you get burnt out. Chris, do you want to add a little bit before I move on from that?
Yeah. So I've been solo now 26 years. And I've seen it all, like most of you. Started out like everyone, come out of law school, have no idea what's going on, and now 51. So we've had all the client experiences, we've had everything. I've had ups, downs. I was extremely overweight and depressed in my 30s. Turned it around. A lot of that, when I reflect back, is a lot of the client stresses, all the demands of this career, all demands of, and I try to explain to my friends who don't understand this, and all of you, being a lawyer is like having your final exam due every day of your life. Most people go to college and everything, they think the final exam, that's it. For our reality, it's like having that do every day of your life over and over and over. And for people like us, we get it. So over the years, I figured, hey, if I'm going to be in this career in the long term, I got to figure out ways to manage this, deal with this, and what habits and what things I could do to put into place that are going to mitigate that. You're not going to completely erase it, but you can mitigate it the best way you can. A lot of it's through physical fitness. A lot of it's through some daily habits, some nighttime routines, which we will get into later. But that's where we're going with this.
So I'd love for you to pay attention. This isn't one of those CLEs where you go off and do something else, because this information is very different from anything you probably heard before. So if you can pay attention, I know there's going to be a replay. They put it on YouTube, but this stuff is going to be new to most of you. And if it's not, then you're a lot better off than everybody else. But the fact is that stress is not just a workload issue, because you have to look at two attorneys, two people, two human beings carrying identical caseloads or having the identical kind of life. One navigates the pressure with clarity and composure, and the other struggles, makes errors, loses perspective. Can everybody hear me okay? Chris, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly, Adam.
Because Evan's saying he's having trouble hearing me, but I just want to make sure. But the other person struggles, makes errors, loses perspective. The difference is not how much they're working, what's on their plate. It's about their mind and how their body responds to that pressure. There's what nobody tells us in any of these CLEs or in life. I mean, I really wish I would have learned this when I was a teenager, because my life would have been a lot easier. But the key is to shift the focus from how much do I have, how much work do I have, to how well am I handling it. This distinction matters because stress is manageable not by reducing the workload necessarily, but by building resilience and improving how you process pressure. That's the key. So we're going to talk about your cognitive load today. Practicing law is all about the quality of how we judge everything, from beginning of the day to the end of the day. We assess, we advise, we strategize, we communicate. Stress degrades all of these capabilities, which directly impact our performance and increase the risk. He's afraid of getting sued for malpractice or bar complaints. We're going to talk a little bit about bar complaints, because I reviewed a bunch from New York and clearly Florida. Every time I open the Bar Journal, it talks about all these bar complaints. When you look at the majority of bar complaints, in some malpractice, the issue truly is burnout. Yes, there's attorneys stealing people's money. We know that happens. But the key is burnout. When people get burnt out, they stop replying, and then the stuff piles and piles up on us. And I've worked with severely depressed lawyers, coaching them, consulting with them. And in the end, one of these guys got sued for malpractice and had a bar complaint in Texas. And part of his challenge was he was so depressed. He was an alcoholic. We have a lot of problems with alcoholism, drug addiction. I was addicted to food. Chris can say the same, because he had gained 60 pounds. I had gained 100 pounds as a lawyer and lost it. But most of us have some kind of addiction because we're trying to cover up stress. And so our client communication suffers, our decision timing, knowing when to act, when to push back. This requires sound judgment. Stress leads to rushed or delayed decisions. So the bottom line is, when stress degrades these core capabilities, our professional performance suffers, risk increases for both attorney and client. So what does stress do to judgment? It narrows our perspective. It reduces our cognitive flexibility. It increases reactivity, and it shortens our decision timelines. You look at it. look at some of the disciplinary matters in New York. You can see this is why people get bar complaints, because they just can't keep up. And the burnout is real. I remember going on vacation years ago when I was under a lot of stress, managing partner of all these companies. And it would take me 5, 6 days of that 7 day vacation to unwind. And I knew something was wrong with that too. So in the end, our decisions are impacted. Our ability to judge and be really great attorneys are impacted. And the result is we make mistakes more often than not when we're under this kind of pressure, when we are burnt out and we don't recognize it in the moment. So there's this decision fatigue is what I call it, when repeated choices degrade the quality of our work. Our bandwidth depletes, small decisions drain our capacity, complex decisions get rushed. The common outcome becomes good enough. It progressively replaces our best judgment, often without our conscious awareness. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is becoming more aware to the triggers that cause our stress and pressure. The triggers are happening and we don't even know what's going on. So we're going to talk a bit about what I call the choice point in a little bit. So what are the real world legal impacts of impaired judgment other than the bar complaints and the malpractice claims? Lost clients, that's key. Missed strategic options. Our narrow thinking causes us to overlook viable strategies, settlement avenues, overreact in negotiations. It makes us reactive. We snap back harder than we should, burn bridges with opposing counsel. God knows I did it, right? In Florida, we have professionalism training. When I got licensed in '98, professionalism training, and I'm thinking, we have to learn how to be professionals. Well, this is part of the challenge. The bar associations don't get that. It's this reactivity that causes us to blow sometimes. And so poor client communication, not a good thing as a lawyer, especially
Adam, Adam, if I could chime in there, I do a lot of appearance work for a lot of firms. So I'm in courthouse every single day and I have dozens of interactions every day. And I will tell you, when you have a negative interaction with somebody, you rarely forget it. If someone is irritable and they're mean to you, or they yell at you, or they leave a bad impression on you, whether it's with you or a judge, you rarely forget it. And I've had a few instances recently with lawyers who were just off their rocker, and the judge would look at me on the side and say, Chris, I'm never going to forget that person. I'm never going to forget that interaction. Now, I don't know what's going on in that person's life. They're probably stressed. They're probably chronically, maybe they're depressed. Maybe they have other issues at home, but they're showing up to work with it, and it's impacting their performance.
Well, and their credibility with you goes down the toilet, and the next time you see their name on a pleading, you cringe, right?
Cringe. And no one wants to deal with those people. And every time they get a reputation, and you know what? Yeah, there's a ton of lawyers out there, but this is a small community. And everybody does get to know each other after a while.
So, and then distorted risk tolerance. Stress, this one cuts both ways, right? Sometimes stress makes us overly cautious. We advise against reasonable risk. Other times we're reckless. We take chances we shouldn't. Either way, we're not calibrating risk for what the client actually needs. Now, I want you to hear this because I've studied burnout for a long time. I was burnt out forever in a day. And then when I figured this stuff out, I recognized burnout is not just exhaustion. The conventional view is that burnout is we're just exhausted. This dramatically understates its impact on us as legal professionals. Burnout is a state of prolonged internal straining, a condition in which the cognitive and emotional systems required for effective legal work have been chronically overloaded without adequate recovery. So that vacation story I told you, I was on burnout mode 24/7 for years, and it caught up with me. So this picture represents most attorneys burning down to the end of our candle and hitting a wall in most instances. So let's look at some of the warning signs. What are some warning signs of burnout in lawyers? Avoidance of complex tasks. Start putting stuff off, handing off work that we used to handle without hesitation. Big red flag. Procrastination, even routine familiar work becomes hard to start. Resistance that wasn't there before is now there. Now, let me just do a quick aside. What I've recognized is stress is simple and easy to understand. Stress is just resistance to whatever's happening to you in this moment. We're not going to talk about present moment and all that stuff, way beyond the scope of this. It's too woo-woo for most lawyers anyways, but understand, stress is just you resisting to this moment, pushing back against what's happening in your life. And that happens on and on and on. And so in the end, what stress creates is a fight or flight. We live in a fight or flight. I don't care if you're transactional or you're litigation. You deal with people's problems all day long. And when you are litigating and a litigator, it's kind of like you're at war. And so we wonder why we're in this fight or flight. We have all the adrenaline and cortisol flowing through our system. We can't sleep. Chris is going to talk about that in a few minutes. So that procrastination aspect is seriously important because this is where we start to fall in the trap of putting stuff off and then having too much to do because we're so burnt out. We are reduced as far as our responsiveness, and then we start to emotionally detach. You don't know how many lawyers I've worked with personally that start to emotionally detach from stuff, and that's a big red flag. So burnout is a practice risk, not just a personal one. A bit more errors, communication breaks down, as we said, lower quality, client dissatisfaction. It's not just mental. Stress is not purely a psychological problem. Your brain is releasing hormones, as I said, like cortisol and adrenaline. It's biology happening in real time. Your physical state directly impacts your thinking. When you're stressed, your prefrontal cortex, the rational decision part of our mind, actually becomes less active. Your amygdala, which is the threat detection part, the fight, flight, takes over. That means your body's stress response literally changes how you think, how you pay attention, how you regulate your emotion. So here's the stress response simplified for you. Okay, this is how it works. What we do is our brain perceives a threat. There are no physical threats to our life anymore. Back in the day, we had the fight or flight. We still do. If there's a physical threat, flee, you fight, or you freeze. There's the 3 Fs. Nowadays, there's very little that impacts us as far as our lives are concerned. But this is how the brain is operating from this fight or flight all the time. So simple things. Brain's not distinguishing between a looming trial date and a physical danger. A difficult client or deadline triggers that same alarm system our ancestors used to survive predators. This is the fight or flight response. There's then a biological cascade. As soon as that trigger hits, threat is perceived by the brain and it overdoes it because we're in this mode. We have this biological cascade. The threat signals and fires our stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Your body shifts in survival mode. Heart rate goes up. Tunnel vision is activated. And then our judgment becomes undermined because we are quickly reactive and reacting to and deciding on things. But our profession requires the opposite. It requires us to be deliberate in how we think. We have to have nuanced analysis. We've got to be creative problem solvers. So the biological response worked the way it needed to back in the day when we had real threats, but the practice of law is consistently working against us. We're literally running ancient software in this modern profession, and it doesn't bode well for our health, mental, and physical. So what does the stress response look like in practice? Short-term thinking gets a hit, patience drops, as we talked a little bit about, reaction speeds increases, and our reflection suffers. This is the real cost, right? Deliberate analysis and self-correction. This is what separates good legal work from careless legal work. And those capabilities shrink under stress. The point here is when we understand these 4 shifts, we become we start to recognize that are happening in ourselves, and we can start to eliminate. So, Chris, take over for the next.
Yeah. Well, Adam, what I would also add is it also greatly impacts on how we interact with people in our offices, our colleagues on a day-to-day basis. And I often mention this, like as lawyers, we're spending a lot of time in our offices with paralegals, legal, secretaries, other lawyers, and we spend sometimes more time with those people than we do with our family members or anyone else. And if we're stressed out, they're going to see us at our worst all day when we're stressed out. It's not a good way to go about having an everyday of just having this entire day filled with that kind of thing. So, for many years, I had the exact opposite routine that I have now. I would stay up late at night, pour over work, pour over emails, stay up at night, watch TV, doom scroll, get to bed way too late. That would wind up me overeating, drinking too much, and that would interrupt my sleep, not getting a good night's sleep, wake up not having a good night's sleep, and then I would wake up already behind the eight ball when now I'm expected to perform on a high level, running a law practice, making executive decisions, making decisions for clients, operating in court, showing up, and I was not at my best. And people didn't see me at my best. And physically, I was not at my best. I was overweight, lethargic, aging rapidly, way ahead of my time. And part of fixing all that was asleep. So it's very cliche to say, but yes, everybody should try to get 6, 7, 8 hours sleep a night. We're all a little different, but I would say 6, 7, 8 hours sleep a night. And how do you help that? Part of the way I helped that for myself was getting up a little earlier in the morning. So guess what? You get up a little earlier in the morning, later on at night, you're gonna be a little more tired. So you're gonna be able to go to sleep at night earlier. You're not gonna be, whatever's on your mind, it'll be easier to get off your mind if you're tired from something physically that you did throughout the day. So now it's 8, 9 o'clock at night. You're not going to be thinking about watching TV or watching Netflix or DVR or anything. You're going to be too tired. You're just going to go to bed. Secondly, was putting the phone away and putting what they call blue light away. It helps a lot. Just putting the TV away, the iPad away, and making your bedroom a place of peace. That's where you're arranging your body, that this is where I'm going to bed. This is not where I'm going to watch TV. This is not where I'm going to go play with kids' toys or anything like that. I'm sure everyone has family, family and kids and everything. And you don't have toys all over. There's a place to sleep, place of rest, and carving that place out for that purpose. Because rest and sleep has a lot of functions. That's the way you restore your body. That's the way you restore your mind. There's a lot of things that happen overnight when you get a good night's sleep, other than just the sleeping component. That's where your body repairs itself. Like if you work out as hard as I do, the way I do, sleep is when your body actually repairs itself. It's not when you're working out. It's when you're sleeping. Same with your mind. When you're going to bed a little earlier, you're not up late at night, maybe self-soothing with alcohol or any other things where now you can't even sleep at night, where your mind is going crazy and doing all the other stuff, and you're waking up in the middle of the night and stuff. So when you get a good night's sleep, you wake up, you're ready to attack the day. You're ready to perform. When you wake up, you feel restored. You feel regenerative. When you embrace your colleagues, when you embrace people in court, when you embrace your people in your office, they're going to notice the difference. If you show up and the first thing you do is out of your mouth is like, oh, I didn't sleep good, I'm tired, I'm complaining. After a while, people pick up on that, and they're going to think a little differently of you. Once in a while, fine. We all have to pull an all-nighter. But it's about putting and managing habits over time. Part of it is getting to sleep a little earlier, putting the blue light away. In my own house, I go to bed very early, and we have dark window shades. So when it's summer and it's 8 o'clock and it's still light out, you know what? It doesn't matter. The room's still dark, but it's still easier for me to get to bed because all those triggers that would otherwise keep me awake, they're no longer there. So one of the things I would suggest highly for everyone is have a good sleep pattern and a sleep routine that works for you, that you can get to sleep on a good, consistent routine that works for you, that when you wake up in the morning, you feel energized and you're ready to go.
So let's talk about the silent drain, performance drain, Chris.
Yeah.
is
So
sedentary,
when
high
you wake up and
pressure.
you're drained, people pick up on it. And let's say you're a litigator, you're a lawyer. People make snap judgments about you, about your physicality or how you present yourself or how you show up. If you show up in court and you look disheveled and you look like you haven't slept in 2 days, you know what? People are going to just look at you like, yeah, this guy's not mentally prepared for his case either. He's physically obviously not prepared. So mentally, he's probably behind the eight ball too. And you know what? People act accordingly. That's just how it goes. And when you become irritable and you become not pleasant to deal with because you're you haven't slept well and you're overspent, it accumulates over time in terms of how you are going to interact with the world and how the world interacts with you versus having negative interactions with everybody, and that might not even be a court. That might be with the local ticket person. That might be at the local deli. That could be at the local, it could be with your child. That could be with your family members at home. So sleep is vital. We all hear about it, but I will say my life turned around completely when I changed my sleep patterns around and habits.
Not the fact that we're sedentary as lawyers, the poor nutrition. What is the cumulative effect that it has on us when we're not getting enough exercise, we're eating a bunch of crap, drinking too much caffeine? Talk about that a little bit, please.
Well, that's funny too when you mention that. So I try to keep to that 10,000 steps a day. I know it's kind of cheeky and it's kind of cliche, but I try to keep to that. And I notice when I get more steps in a day, when I get more activity in, I'm definitely more regulated hormonally. I could sleep better. I get to sleep. There's no problem. When I put my head to sleep, it's not like I'm sitting there, my mind is racing all over the place. I could get to sleep. It's fine. And it's a matter of putting into place systems and habits that you can actually do. Okay. So sometimes people go into like an all or nothing type of mentality where like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. When you put into little habits and structures throughout your day, especially as lawyers, you don't have to do a 2-hour marathon workout a day. But if you could get up every few hours and walk out 10, 15 minutes here and there, you'd be surprised. By the end of the day, you already got 10,000 steps. You already worked out. You already did this. So you're not beating yourself up at the end of the day and you feel like I didn't do anything. And now at night, your mind is racing. You're not physically tired. And now you can't get to bed. It's 10 o'clock at night. And you're like, what do I do? Let me turn on the iPad and I watch a DVR. And then you don't sleep. And then the next morning you wake up and you're at work and it all adds up. I've done this. I've been there. I've done that. And what I've found has worked the best for me, at least on my end, is getting up a little earlier, making sure I get consistent movement throughout the day, focus on my steps, focus on general movement patterns for the day, not having caffeine after 12 o'clock. Because you know what? You can have a cup of coffee at 12 o'clock. You're like, oh, I'm tired. But caffeine stays in your system for hours after you consume it. It's not that you get that quick hit of a coffee or something at like 1 or 2 o'clock and it's gone. You might get that quick, but that caffeine stays in your system. So now later on, you're not going to be able to go to bed. And then you'll be sitting there looking at the ceiling, and then it's getting at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, knowing you got to get up at 7 o'clock to get on the train, and now you're screwed for the next day. And that pattern repeats for a lot of people.
You lost that 60 pounds. What did it do for your abilities as a lawyer?
Self-confidence, feeling. Number one, I think big was seeing, there's a picture I could send any one of it to you. I was 36, 37 years old on the front page of the Bar Association newsletter, shocked, completely shocked. I said, who is this person? I didn't recognize this person. I said, this is not me. I'm better than this. I don't want to be like this anymore. And it took a while, it took about a year and a half, but it was the best thing I ever did because my 40s were great. My 50s, I'm 51 now, and I move great. I'm not winded. I go up and down the stairs. I run in court. I'm gregarious. I have a ton of energy. Other lawyers pick up on it. And guess what? On a personal business level, people pick up on that energy. Chris, give me your card. I want you. Chris, give me your card. You can help me. Because people are attracted to people with high energy levels that they feel like, hey, I want that guy representing me. Not someone who's going to be sitting there complaining, tired, always winded. That's on a very visceral level with a lot of people. And that's a business professional tip that's helped me throughout my 40s Like, I can't even tell you. So that's on a money basis, professional basis, personal, physical basis. When you get yourself in better physical shape, people are attracted to that. And they're like, yeah, if he could do it for himself, he could help me with that. And you will get more clients and more business that way. Promise.
Next, we're going to talk about the central connection between our physiology, our ability to think, cognition, and judgment. This is the chain that governs professional performance under stress. Not abstract theory, it's a biological sequence with direct practical implications for every legal matter that we handle as attorneys. Our physical state of our bodies determine the quality of our thought. This is what Chris was leading up to. Quality of thought determines the quality of our judgment, and the quality of judgment determines the quality of our ability to be the best lawyers we can be. So if our physiology is off, or sleep deprived, physically deprived, nutrition is off, cognition's impaired, our judgment's impacted. So managing our physical health is not separate from our professional responsibilities. It's a precondition for it. So the problem with just manage your stress, most strategies are reactive. As I told you before, I tried 45 different modalities. They're reactive. They're very short-lived. They don't eliminate stress from your thinking. They're temporary. They're not structural changes. And we're going to talk about the beginnings of the structural changes that you can start to implement today by looking at how you do stress day in and day out. Most of the time, in 99% of managing your stress or coping skills, the root cause of our stresses remain unaddressed. If we don't address these issues, physiological and cognitive mechanisms, the degradation happens quickly. And it's what happened with me. I had all kinds of issues physically because I was under this ridiculous amount of stress. So we're going to talk now about some solutions, okay? What I call it is regulation. Regulation is fundamentally different from suppressing, which is basically ignoring the stress or trying to manage it. It's not avoidance. That's what a lot of people do with the alcohol, the drugs, and food. It's about actively restoring the nervous system to baseline functioning. When we suppress stress, we're pushing it underground, pushing down in the body, where it continues to undermine how we practice law. True regulation means bringing our nervous systems back into state where we can make clear and deliberate decisions, and our professional decisions get much, much better than they were before, like when we were newly minted as a lawyer. The distinction's critical. Regulation helps to fix the problem. The key insight is it restores our capacity for the clear judgment. So what does effective regulation do for our performance? It expands our perspective, improves our decision-making, reduces reactivity, and supports our communication skills. So let's talk about practically applying regulation. What is it? It's not theoretical. We're going to give you a practical tool to start with today. Easy, simple. Basically, I call it the choice point. We're going to get to it in a second. But what this matters most is when things feel urgent and we feel the pressure, that's when regulation delivers real change in our high-stakes decision during negotiations and all of that. Early warning signs, we talked a little bit about this before, feeling rushed, irritable, tunnel vision, and urgency without clarity. When we start to understand that before the stress starts to hit us big time day in and day out, we can decide whether we're reacting, which is doing the same thing over and over, because stress, it ends up is a habit. If we react, we're doing the same thing over and over. If we evaluate, if we respond to the moment, that changes everything. It's becoming aware of the resistance you're having in any given moment and during the day. So the core idea here is when we create this gap between the trigger, the stimulus, that trigger is causing stress over and over and over. And I have a stress loop that I teach to people one-on-one where it just continues. It's a big figure eight, like depression. It continues over and over and over. And so when you start to ask the question, am I reacting or am I actually, do I want to respond or evaluate? And then, am I narrowing or expanding my options? Have I genuinely considered the full range of strategies? Just taking a quick step back from the decisions you're making, or are you defaulting to the most immediate path? Are you rushing unnecessarily? What I want to help you move towards is, instead of reacting, responding to life. This is a 3-step reset. Pretty simple. I alluded to some of it before. Step 1 is pause. Pause. The goal is to interrupt the automatic stress response before it takes over your behavior, before it takes over the body, through the emotional process that we run day in and day out. 2 seconds can create enough space for conscious choices, not hesitation. It's not weakness. It becomes professional discipline.
But Adam, if I can,
Sure.
as a practical step, and this is is when talking about pause, reassess, reengage. Part of that is also having a non-negotiable carve out in your life that's completely the opposite of what's causing you the stress. So obviously, being lawyers, we always feel like we're on this roller coaster that we can't get away from. We're always on this wheel that just, it's always there. It's always going to be there. 24/7. We all know it. We all get it. But carving out something completely different aside from this that you make your own, and it's a non-negotiable. For some people, it could be a musical instrument. For some people, it could be painting. For me, it's I do weightlifting and jiu-jitsu. I love it only because that's what I love. But just creating something outside of that whole stress environment that you make your own. You pick whatever it is. Some people like pickleball. That's not my thing, but some people absolutely love it. But they create that little carve out where I'm going to do this for whatever, 2, 3, 4 times a week, and nothing's going to get in the way with that. That's definitely what helped me the most.
Yeah, I can't see
getting
you
in my
playing
mind
pickleball.
that.
Hey,
Yeah,
before
see,
we get to the next step, I just want to pop in and give the course code. The course code is stress. The course code is stress.
thank you, Diana. Step
Thank
2,
you.
reassess. Apply the decision checkpoint. Whether we're impulsive and reacting, if you do these 3 steps day in and day out, which the 3rd step is re-engage with clarity, return to the matter from a regulated baseline. If you stop and check in with yourself and you perform these really quick 3 steps, it can be 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. I call it a micro pause. This creates a new habit to where you don't get caught up in the reaction mode. It's practical, repeatable, and it works with your life in general and practicing law. So risk reduction through better regulation, clearer legal analysis, improved client communication. We know we reduce our professional risk. Chris, did you have something?
No, improve client communication. Adam, you mentioned this previously. One of the main things that I've always seen in any of the complaints with bars is attorneys not communicating with the clients. Like, oh, the attorney went dark, or he didn't respond to me, neglected the file. Then you result in missed statute of limitations or case dismissed, that kind of stuff. Obviously, an attorney overwhelmed. That's one of the, other than client taking some of the client's money in a real estate thing. That's probably one of the biggest bar complaints I've ever seen.
Big time. So there's 3 amplifiers that I've seen in my work, in my personal life and my work with over 500 lawyers in the consulting area. It was a bar review article written in 2001, and it was done by a psychologist, and he brought up 3 bad keywords, as I call them, and I use these amplifiers with every single person I work with. And ultimately, what you have to understand is that every lawyer has some or all of these that create issues in their lives. Every lawyer is taught to be a perfectionist. Nobody's perfect. Nothing's perfect. I know we have to dot every I and cross every T in the law, but the drive for this error-free can paralyze our decision making. And we're trained to catch every detail, but this strength becomes a liability, and it prevents us a lot of times from moving forward. And then pessimism, glass half full, glass half empty. We are trained from law school forward to anticipate problems. This systemic bias towards worst case scenario amplifies our threat perception to fight or flight and keeps us in this heightened stress state. And then procrastination. That's the biggest one, and it encapsulates everything. What we start to do is we feel lazy, put stuff off, but it's actually avoidance behavior. Small tasks balloon into high pressure crises because we delay starting them. The key point here is these aren't character flaws. They're not personal weaknesses. They're patterns that developed as professional strengths, but they devolved into something that's actually causing us a lot of issues. So,
Yeah. And Adam, what I would say is those issues don't get better the more we procrastinate. They get even harder because then smaller problems turn into bigger problems, and then that crisis mode and fight or flight mode even amplifies. And now we're not even addressing the current client matters. We're dealing with stuff that we should have dealt with months ago. That now is a critical crisis mode, and that just amplifies the stress, the cortisol, that we're dealing with.
So let's talk about the 5 principles that form the foundation of this stress-informed professional practice. What we really want for you is to continue making as good of decisions as you can. So this awareness that you're doing stress to yourself based on the resistance to whatever's happening in this moment is key. Now that you know this, you don't have to be who you were before, which is fight or flight, living in that craziness day in and day out. When you look at how two identical people that have the same kind of outward pressure process it differently, this is the first step. Absolutely the first step. Stress starts to change our judgment in real time. When stress escalates, our perspective narrows and we become more reactive. Our decision quality drops often without realizing it's happening. One of the things I would love for you to do is go through the questions. I'm going to show them to you briefly in the handout. There's some questions that are pretty compelling and important. What are your stress triggers? This is stuff I teach in my online course where I ask, what are your triggers? And you have triggers in your personal life, in your professional life. Triggers cause us to operate exactly the same way over and over and over. And if you can understand what triggers you, now here's case in point from my practice. I remember back when I was still using Windows computers and I had Outlook on, and that ding, the constant ding of Outlook would make me cringe. And it really caused me to have stress because I would, what's what now? It made me tired listening to the ding. So then when I stopped practicing law and I was working with people one-to-one, at first, I would hear the ding of Outlook in the background. And it triggered me. I wasn't practicing law anymore. I was really doing some amazing work with lawyers, and I loved what I was doing. I didn't particularly like practicing law. I was the managing partner of all these companies, and I had a guy who was my age now, back when I was first starting, and he wanted to go play golf every day. And I'm like, okay. So what ultimately happened when I started hearing the ding in other people's computers, recognize that as a stress trigger. So what are your triggers? Because your triggers will tell you what you're resisting in this moment. So if we can stop resisting, stop reacting, which is doing the same thing over and over, get into a place where we build this new habit. And it is basically what I start people with. So I'm giving you stuff that I teach people one-to-one. This is building a new habit. Building new habits takes some time. So start recognizing where the triggers hit. You feel this little spark in you. I call it like a little earthquake. Little earthquakes hit us, these sparks, where it's all day long. That's why I wanted to bring up the email ding, because it's a zzz, right? And that causes us over time to our cognitive function to decline. So if you look at what your triggers are, you start to understand how they work. And in real time, you build a new habit that causes you to look at life a little bit differently. Our perspective becomes open to not being so stressed out anymore. You're going to have caseloads. You're going to have tons of work as a lawyer, but it depends on how you look at it. And that migraine story that I told at the beginning, reason why I felt all that pressure and ended up having that crazy migraine where I couldn't speak was because I knew what was coming that day. And by 11 o'clock in the morning, I felt it, and it caused me to shut down ultimately. So suppression is not regulation. You can't just push down everything and expect it to go away. True regulation restores our mental clarity and need for sound judgment. That pause that I talked through, the choice point pause, creates this brief space that when whatever triggers us, stop that trigger and the crescendo of the emotions and the cortisol and the adrenaline that happen, or you pause and stop that crescendo and start to respond to life. You can transform your communication, your strategy, and decisions. And your professional performance depends on this clarity. As Chris said, sleep, recovery, your physical health, and emotional regulation, they're not luxuries. They're absolutely not luxuries to the legal work you're doing. They're foundational on how you perform. These are not abstract concepts. They're practical tools that begin process of you choosing. Once again, this is the worksheet that the reflection and practical integration that Diana should have sent out or will send out. Go through these questions. These are the questions I work one-to-one with people on. You should probably revisit these periodically because slip back into old patterns and old habits. Chris, anything to say before we wrap up here?
What I would say is one of the best things that I ever did mentally was I created some non-negotiables in my mind. Non-negotiables of that no matter what is going on in the world, no matter what is going on in my practice, and no matter what is going on, this is a non-negotiable. Part of it is getting enough sleep. 2, staying physically active. One of them is getting up and moving, walking. One of the other ones is internally just having some kind of gratitude in my mind. What am I grateful for? What am I thankful for? Another non-negotiable I have is trying to be part of a community other than just myself. Because when you're just part of yourself inside, usually that's not, what do they say? Idle hands at devil's playground. Find a community of people that you can associate with. Doesn't matter. Walking group, could be anything. Gardening group, doesn't matter. Dog walking group. When you add those things in and you layer those things on top of each other and staying physically active, staying physically fit, you'll find that the stress can be handled. It can be dealt with. It can be managed. That where certain things would crush other people, now you're not in that spot because you have all these little layers of sort of protection that you're building that are buffering you, and they're also buttressing you underneath all that. So that would be my only thing. I mean, I could go way deeper into that. We don't have time. I appreciate everybody listening to us, but I will say my 30s were pretty tough. My 40s were amazing, and I'm killing it in my 50s. And a lot of it's through habits of what Adams said in terms of being cognizant of the stresses, dealing with it, putting systems and habits into place that are going to help this. Okay. It's not just you're going to read a book. It's not just you're going to hit list some podcasts. It's systems and habits that you put into place that will help.
Judith asked a question. Let me just cover it really quickly. If there's any other questions, please drop them in the chat. She said, what are the statistics for depression, addiction, and suicide in our profession compared to others? From the last thing I saw, Judith, I think dentists are at the top of the list, which when I saw that years ago, they continue to be at the top of the list. Lawyers are right there. I mean, it's neck and neck. And there's other professions that, look, professions in general, doctors are in the same place we are. They have to solve problems all day long. CPAs dealing with problems all day long. God, I don't know how those people do it, but
well, Adam,
in the end,
Adam, let me interject real quick because I know everyone's got to go, but I want to use it real quick. I deal with pro se's all the time in court. They are so stressed out walking into that building, and nobody wants to be there. And part of my first thing is putting them at ease and saying, I get it. You're stressed out. this is a highly emotional, stressful environment. And I could only imagine, like, we deal with that all the time. And I always say to the people, like, it's okay. We're going to work this out. Don't worry. It's going to be all right. Same thing for the lawyers here. It's going to be all right. Once you learn how to manage it, once you learn how to deal with it, take a deep breath, take a step back, engage, you'll be fine. And, you know, I deal with this a few times a day. I dealt with that 3 times this morning, actually, with pro se people. And the stress that they encountered, and then I put them at ease. It's okay. Same thing of what we're trying to get through here to everybody.
Diana, Richard, thank you for the opportunity. We hope you guys learned a lot. We appreciate you being here and paying attention. Any other questions, feel free to reach out to Chris or I.
Thank you all for attending today. I really appreciate it. Adam, Chris, great job. It was very interesting. We really appreciate it. Also, I just wanted to remind everyone, I will resend the material in a few. Once I compile the list, I'll get that out to everyone, and you will get your CLE certificates within the week.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.
Hit us up anytime. We're all available all the time.
Have a good day.
Good. Hope you enjoyed it. I mean, we could
Thank
go
you.
on this topic for all day, but, you know, we tried to squeeze in as much as possible in an hour. You know?
It was great. Thank you. Someone wants this once a year. They said it should be one of the mandatory categories.
Well,
So
it's too bad that New York doesn't have wellness CLE requirements. Most states do now, and we could have talked about other things, but kind of like boxed in by New York's requirements. And the stuff I do for Florida CLEs, it goes way above and beyond what I was able to do here. But appreciate it no matter what. Thank you.
thanks,
You know what?
everyone.
Adam and I are real people with real experience. We're not just one of those droning on, like, just types. Like, that's when I met Adam, like, that's why I got along with him so well. We're real people, been through it, up and down, sideways. You know, we're not like those pod people, you know. So hopefully there's a relatability factor that people got with us, you know.
All right, everybody, take care.
Thanks again.
Take care.